Okay, now we're in E4, and we're covering now Moses' own voting period. And again, before we get there, I want to sort of review where we've gone. Adam becomes super mature in 130 after his fall, evidenced by Seth being born. That created an extension of what would have normally been the 490 deadline to 622. And it's really important to notice that because Jared makes it in 622, which means these other people didn't. Or something went wrong. I'm not sure quite what, but it was real important for Jared to make it because the Bible's making a point about him making it. So Jared is now carrying the time baton. Underneath the absolute 490, Jared is now carrying the time baton for another 490 years. He has Enoch, who's also super positive, so super positive that he doesn't even physically die. And Enoch has Methuselah, which is talking about the flood. His very name is an advertisement of the flood, in 687 from Adam. So Enoch obviously had a 490. There is another award that I haven't talked about very much called a 1000 award. It's even a greater supermaturity someone has to win in order to win 1,000 years. And this is really important. Just like the 490 has to be carried by somebody, and when they win, the year they win begins a personal underlying count. So we got from 130 to 622 here. The same thing is true for a 1000. So in the year 687 from Adam, okay, obviously 300 years before the 1000 here ends, Enoch won it, and we know he won it because he was so good God took him. All right? And that is evidenced by his son Methuselah, because if Enoch didn't win it, Methuselah couldn't have gone on living. Methuselah goes on living almost 1,000 years. So we know Enoch won the 1,000 years. All right? Therefore, the fact that there were bad votes here, evidenced by the fact that the distance between Jared and Adam is 490 years, early and late in the year. The votes didn't go real well. Believers weren't really voting to know God. They believed they got saved, but they didn't really care about knowing God. Okay, so Jared did. So Jared's carrying the time baton, and just like Jared's carrying the time baton for the 490, Enoch himself is super mature enough that he gets his own 490, but he also gets the 1,000. So now time can be financed to run for 1,000 years after his grant. So notice how that runs to 1687. 1687. The flood will occur about 30 years prior. Okay? So time is being financed on 2 tracks. And it's running in historical terms, but the promise of it is running underneath based on the births of these kids. It's going to be really important when we get to Israel. All right? So try to get this now. 687 plus 1,000 is 1687 from Adam. That time has been financed. Somebody won the 1,000 during the 1,000. And the year he wins it finances time for another 1,000 years after, based on the year he got his award. There's a whole basis for the timing of Messiah. Okay, so try to understand it first. All right, so the 1,000 closes, and this is the unbeliever voting period. All right, with Enoch carrying time, Methuselah his son being therefore guaranteed time, or Methuselah himself winning it, I'm not sure which, until the flood happens, which is 1,000 years later approximately, because, you know, Enoch was talking about the flood obviously before that, or he wouldn't have named his kid. When he dies, it happens. That's a promise from God at the birth. Okay, so Enoch knew how to name his kid from God. So therefore Enoch was telling everybody, warning, 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 so much so he names his kid. All right? So Methuselah goes on living and has his own kid, who's Lamech, just before the voting period ends in 874. Okay? So we had this voting period of believers, and it didn't go well. because Jared is getting his award just when the 490 runs out. Okay? And this voting window didn't go too well either. And we know that because of the announcement of Methuselah, and that is occurring in 687. All right? So now we have this voting window for unbelievers to learn God or not. They obviously chose not to. Therefore, we got Lamech, the son of Methuselah. He has a son named Noah, meaning rest. 1056, 6 years after this closes. So Lamech was about 6 years late in super maturing. I should have colored him in blue. All right. Noah, therefore, is going to be the poster boy to carry time. Noah super matures in 1556, and just like we had with Adam, we got a covenant with Noah. So we know Noah wins the 1,000 and the 490 because God makes a special covenant with him, and he's the only guy who, him and his family are the only ones who survived the flood. So it had to be a covenant for both with Noah, or time couldn't continue. All right? So that has happened. This is when Enoch wins his 1,000, and about 100 years before that's up, 130 years before that's up to be precise, Noah gets his supermaturation award. He's 500 years old at that time. Shem is born to commemorate it. Shem and his two brothers. Okay? And that's how time gets carried. Now notice, this is the end of the first 1,000. It is covered, as it were, by Enoch, whose 1,000 time grant runs about 130 years beyond Noah's. But Noah gets his in time. So there's a new person to carry the 1,000 baton and a new person to carry the 490 baton, and that person is Noah, who votes during the absolute believer voting window between 1540 and 1610. So, whew, just in time. Okay, 130 years is kind of cutting it close. All right? So now Noah is carrying time. All right? That's going to bring us, because there's a big distance between Abraham and Moses, and I'm going to have to cover that distance now. That's a believer voting window for the new, see, we're now in the second 1,000. Here's the first voting window, 490 and 560 years later, 490 years, 560 years, Noah votes. He wins a 490 and he wins a 1,000. Okay, Shem is evidence of that. Then there's the flood. When for Noah's 600th birthday, the flood begins. Okay, now, I'm going to have to count, because I have to get to Moses first. All right, notice when this is happening. This is Abram. This is the end of the second. This is the end of the second 2,000, the second 1,000, right here. There's the voting window for unbelievers. Okay? This is a deadline for somebody else to win the 1,000 award. Okay? First it was Enoch, then it was Noah. Noah wins it for this period ending in absolute terms of 2,000. Okay? I'm sorry this is a little complicated, but God's justice is complicated sometimes. Okay, so Noah won the 1,000. Noah also won the 490. Now pay real close attention to this. He wins it in 1556 from Adam. 490 years after 1556 is 2046. And that 2046 is occurring just before the second 2,000 in absolute terms with the voting window runs out. See, because it's 1050. Okay, we got a 1,000, and we got the voting window, and the total period is 1050. So again, here's what would normally be 2,000, but that's only 1,000 years after 1050. So the unbeliever voting window is now here. That ends 2100. This is where the Jews are getting their age of desolation. Only they call it 2,000. That's shorthand. It's really 2100 years. And the unbelievers are supposed to vote here. This is after the flood now. Now notice very carefully again, 1556 to 2046, which is Abram's voting period, is 490 years. So there had to be somebody 490 years after Noah to win the supermaturation award. And in the very year that Noah's supermaturation award is going to run out, for the 490, Abram wins it. Okay? But Abram wins it during, just before the end of the second 2000. This is really critical to the whole story of the accounting. Abraham is winning it 54 years before the civilization 2000 ends. See, this is 1,000 years after 1050. So he's winning it early. Okay? And because he's winning it early, God's going to make time adjustments for the Jews based on when Abram wins it. It's a big conundrum in theology about, oh, well, how come, the temple continued 40 years after Christ died? Because they're trying, they don't know these doctrines about time. Because they never plotted it, I guess. They don't know how God is timing all this, which is all taken from, the Bible. I just plotted the Bible's dates. They don't know this, so they don't understand why the temple survived 40 more years after Christ died. They expected it to go down right away. Now, in Ephesians 1, Paul's going to track these things I'm talking about here right now. That's why I'm going through it. Is that Paul's going to talk back to this to show why the temple's going to go down in what we call 70 AD. Okay? Because he's tracking back to this time. It's analogous to the flood. It's analogous to the time that Abraham supermatured early, and God is balancing the time books, because the Jews start right here in 2046 from Adam. Okay? Abram is born in 1946 from Adam, but he gets his covenant when he's 100 years old, as evidenced by Isaac in row 53. Row 48, Abram. Row 53, Isaac. Isaac is the son, signifying the covenant. Now, just like Noah, okay, up here, God makes a direct covenant with Abram. And the rules are very different. Okay? This is what's an important change. God had announced the voting period here. Noah voted. He's one guy voting. One guy. Here, Abram voted. He's one guy voting. But he's not voting during a voting period. That's why Moses doesn't talk about him. Okay, he's not voting during a voting period. He's voting just before the end of the 1,000, and then the voting period would occur. Moses is only accounting by 70s. Noah voted during the 70-year voting period. So Moses is going to skip over Abraham, but he's not skipped over from the accounting. He's just skipped over from, this 70 voting period. Okay? And this is 90-12, which is Moses' own vote. So I'm explaining why Moses is skipping over Abram. Because Abram's vote didn't occur during a 70-year voting window like Noah's did. Okay? So, Abram becomes mature, super mature, wins a 1,000, and obviously wins the 490, or we'd all not be here, because there's only 490 years between these two dates. And then Abraham is he's renamed Abraham, and he's given to be the line of the Messiah. All the people are going to be blessed through him. Okay? That's slightly different from the Noahic covenant. And I'm not going to go through the differences in the covenants right now, because you can get that from pretty much any teacher you want. It's pretty standard theology. Okay, so Abram. Now, this is really important, his people are to be the carriers of time. His people. His descendants through Isaac. All right, and I don't know how familiar you are with the story of Abraham, but I suggest that you go look it up. Okay, and it's in Genesis 12, Genesis 15, Genesis 17. It's his people. All right, so the rules about granting time and who gets the covenant and who wins the 490 are now restricted. Okay, they're restricted to Abram's people. Now, the Lord and Paul and, a lot of the New Testament talks a lot about this. Who are the sons of Abraham? Okay, to be a son of Abraham, you got to do what Abraham did. Believe in the Lord. Genesis 15:6. So no matter who you are racially, if you did what Abram did, you're a son of Abraham. Especially during this time, because this was the covenant to Abraham. And obviously anybody who believed in the same God Abraham believed in went to live with Abraham. And became part of his family. That's one of the reasons he probably became so rich. He was really rich. He was so rich he was on a first-name basis with kings in the Levant. Okay, I mean, you can read about this yourself in Genesis 12 onward. Okay. So, Abram won the award here. And he wasn't a good guy. Just like Noah wasn't a good guy. These people who think that these Bible heroes were, holy and moral and all that, they weren't. I mean, Noah gets involved in sodomy just after the flood. My pastor spent a lot of time on that. They cover it up. Some of the English translations don't cover it up. But a lot of the English translations cover it up. Noah's sin. And one of my Bibles actually marks off the chapter where he has that incident with his son Canaan. He gets drunk and he gets into it with his son. Okay? That's after the flood. That's after he has his covenant. So it isn't based on how moral you are. Obviously, if you care about God, you're going to try to be moral, but you're going to screw up. Okay, so all these people trying to tell you that you don't sin anymore after you're saved. Honey, your sins just begin when you're saved. Because you got the pressure. You can't believe how bad the pressure is once you start to get mature. Okay, so here's Abram, and he wasn't exactly a good guy either. Okay, he was busy lying about his wife so that he wouldn't get killed. Pretending that she was his sister, because she was very pretty. And kings, wanted her. Okay? And, she's barren. And so she says, use my handmaid. So then he has sex with his, wife's servant. Why didn't he say no? If he believed in God so strongly, why didn't he say no? God had promised him a kid, but it was on God's timeline. So you see, these are normal human beings that make really big mistakes. But they believe in God, just like it says in Genesis 15:6. Abraham believed in God. That's the only thing that distinguished him. Just like it was with Noah. Okay? Believing is what saves you, and believing is what grows you, and there ain't nothing else. There were lots of moral people alive during this time. Lots of moral people drowned in the flood. Okay, so now we got Abram. He wins his 490. He wins a 1,000, and is closing the second 2,000 years at this point. Okay? So now, I'm sorry that the prologues are always so long, but, it's just like when you sing the Star-Spangled Banner. Okay? There's a whole story behind the Star-Spangled Banner about the Revolutionary War. You can sing the words and not know what they mean. But there's a story behind it. Okay, well, there's a story behind these words in Psalm 90. And the Jews knew what that story was. It's too bad we Christians don't, but we're starting to learn it now. Okay? So here we go. Voting window. Second 2000 ending. Voting window for the unbelievers. Not particularly good, but no cause for a second flood. And now, the voting restrictions. Only Abram's people. They are the only ones who can carry time. So if you believe in God the way Abram did, you would find out about Abram and you'd go to where he was. God would lead you there. Because he was the promised people. It goes to a promised people. And all the rest of the human race is carried because of these promised people, who we know in history as the Jews. Okay? Voting window for everybody else occurs. But because Abram wins it, that voting window can occur. And now we have Isaac. Isaac, of course, was born during this point. Isaac looks like he might have won the award. I'm not 100% sure. But the point is that he too, doesn't have kids right away until he's 60. And then he has his his wife ends up bearing 2 kids, one of whom does not believe, and the other one whom does. And the word Jacob here is chiseler. It means he's a manipulator. See, he wasn't a nice guy either, but he believed. That's the stress in the Bible. These are the people who believed. Okay? They didn't have anything to recommend them except they believed in Christ, as he was then revealed. Alright? So he's born in 2106. Alright? And then, of course, in 2160, he's going to have his own kid, but we'll worry about that later. Okay, the point is that Jacob ends up being born from Isaac. Alright, and this is where history starts tracking, because Jacob is carrying now, because remember, it's Abram's sons, but some sons don't believe, so then it doesn't go through them. That's the big point that Paul's making in Romans 9. Jacob was appointed from Isaac. Isaac was promised, Jacob was promised. And that's why God says to him, and God makes a covenant with him. Okay, right here, in 2166 from Adam. Okay, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Alright? So that is occurring 66 years after the second 2000 has ended. 66 years after the second 2000 has ended. Okay, now everybody's being carried by the 490 from Abraham. Alright, so this is happening well within 490 years of that point. And then we have Joseph, and this is another shift that occurs in the timeline. Joseph is born in 2160 from Adam. Okay? That's 6 years prior to Jacob getting his covenant with God renewed, personally renewed with God. So it goes from Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob. Israel means Prince of God. Okay, Joseph super matures real early. He's only 17. But because he super matures, his brothers are jealous of him and they sell him into slavery. Okay? So he's sold into slavery at about 16, 17 years old. Okay? And at that point, he's super mature, and the 490 time grant shifts through him. Now, how do we know that? Because 490 years later is the Exodus. Okay? That's what the Bible's tracking. So all of his brothers, whether they believed in God or not, they didn't mature. And so it goes through Joseph. And he carries the baton at this point. Now he's getting it well in advance of. See, Abram's 490 is still running. It's going to run for, another 25, until about 2500. What is it? 2046 plus 490 till 2536. Okay? But somebody's got to get the 490 now, because 2536 is still short of when the Exodus is going to happen. So this is when Joseph super matures, and he gets, and you know that because God's talking to him all the time with the dreams and all that good stuff. And you can download genius.xls, which is this worksheet, and see what all the stuff that happened. The lean years and the fat years are each taking place within a 40-year window. And I'll just let you, look at that in your free time. I got to skip fast now. Okay, so we're in the second 2000 of history. Okay, it's marked by Abraham having matured 54 years early. It's marked by Jacob going and coming, back with his doubled family. Joseph super maturing in 2176 from Adam. Okay, and then the whole story about Joseph in Egypt and all that other good stuff. Jacob enters Egypt in 2236, 430 years later to the day, according to Exodus 12:40 through 41. That is when the Exodus will occur. Okay, Jacob's 130 years at that point. If you want to know, and I've already said this, but I'll say it again, I plotted the Bible verses that go with this worksheet in several places, but the quickest place to see them is in brainoutfac.htm. The fac is in caps, number 6A, and link will be in the sidebar in the video description, so that you can see where I'm getting this from. All right, and save you some time in looking it up in the Bible for yourself, because I list the verses. Okay, so we've started the 2000. This is the 2000 that's supposed to belong to the Jews. They call this the age of Torah in today's Judaism. And it starts with, Abram, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Then we got the enslavement in Egypt. That's when that's when they go there. The first 30 years they're free because Joseph is still vizier. And then after he dies, shortly after he dies, about, say, right here, it's under Amenemhet III, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, my 1985 hardback books. They've changed it since. Modern Egyptology is kind of screwball. It was better 20 years ago, so look at the older Egyptology books. They have more integrity than the modern Egyptology. So Amenemhet III was the ruler under whom Joseph retired and then died. And he's the guy who ended up becoming cruel and, through eminent domain kind of ploys, chiseled away at the land in Goshen and turned it into granary cities, and that's how the Jews became temple building slaves. They were never agricultural slaves. They were temple building slaves. Okay? That's why, and you can sort of see why God would use that, because they end up building the temple once they get into the land for themselves. Okay, so that is this the second, 1000 playing until we get to the end of Abram's personal 490. Abram's personal 490 runs out in 2536, but Joseph had won his own 490 here, so he's still carrying time. All right, Moses is born, get this, 50 years after Abraham's personal 490 runs out. So that's why we know it's Joseph. Okay, because Jacob's 490 wouldn't have lasted long enough either. Okay, so Moses is born in 2586 from Adam. All right, that's our 1520 BC. And now, look at this, look real close. Let me see if I can, I wonder if I want to do this. Oops, that's not going to work. That's not good enough. We'll just go back. Here it is, the start of the second 1000. Okay, now we're coming up to our first voting window of the second 1000. That's where we cut into Psalm 90. Because remember, this is 70 syllables. It's talking about a believer voting window. And here is Moses writing autobiographically of his own experience during the believer voting window that historically ran from 2590 after Adam until 2660 after Adam. Moses is 40 years old. He was supposed to be Pharaoh, but he leaves Egypt in order to learn God. See how propitious that is? Hebrews 11 records his vote. And so does Psalm 90, as we're going to see. Moses leaves Egypt. He leaves being Pharaoh behind. This business about, because they translate it badly, when he kills the taskmaster, okay, as a result of killing the taskmaster, the Jews turn against him, even though he was killing the taskmaster in order to defend the Jews, okay? And at that point, he realizes being Pharaoh is not, he was the heir apparent and all that stuff under Hatshepsut. She dies in the meanwhile, and he realizes, this isn't how it ought to go. So he abdicates in favor of what history knows as Thutmose III, but there are two of them. Okay, there's Thutmose III under Hatshepsut, which is Moses, and then there's Thutmose III after Hatshepsut, which is the concubine's son. And that's why, Egyptologists see this sort of, they call it a sort of schizoid approach to Thutmose III, alternately hating and loving Hatshepsut. This was the real Thutmose III, Moses, during her years. After she died, the concubine's son, who's naturally going to be hostile, comes to power because Moses abdicates, which is what Hebrews 11 tells you. He abdicated. All right? And that's his vote here. He's voting to abdicate so that he can go into the wilderness instead and learn God. He wasn't afraid of what the king would do to him. If somebody would just bother to read the account where he leaves, God tells him to go. He's not afraid of getting caught. God tells him to go. And of course it's mistranslated to make it look like Moses was afraid. But anyway. So now we come to his vote. So let's, okay, here we are. This is the voting period between 490 to 560. This is Moses' own voting period. Sorry it's taking so long. But fortunately the text is going to be kind of easy to go through.